Hello and welcome to Update by Veg Economist. My name is Nadine Filko, and today we are going to touch upon an issue that actually gains relevance and is touched by so many different areas of the industry that we have three very different experts here today. Ingredients. Before we deep dive, I want to thank our sponsor, ADM.
The food and beverage industry is evolving rapidly, and reformulation is becoming a larger part of the discussion. For CPG companies, addressing consumer demands for cleaner labels, higher protein content, reduced sugar and sodium, and optimized fat has become more important than ever. Many consumers are seeking products with simple, recognizable ingredients, like naturally derived colors sourced from fruits and vegetables. Cleaner label reformulations have shifted from being a trend to becoming the new standard in many categories. Alternative sources of protein, like soy and pea, are gaining widespread popularity, offering diverse options to meet consumer preferences. For certain brands, reducing sugar and sodium without compromising flavor also remains a critical hurdle. By leveraging advanced ingredient solutions, brands can strike the perfect balance between indulgence and nutrition. From reducing saturated fats to incorporating heart-healthy oils, fat optimization is also paving the way for more products that align with wellness trends. At ADM, we're here to help you navigate these challenges. With our comprehensive ingredient portfolio and deep technical expertise, we empower brands to reformulate in ways that will delight consumers. So reach out to ADM today and let's explore what's possible.
So reformulating products actually is, kind of the heart of ingredient talk. But actually, we do see very, very many different areas where we see change. For example, in my experience in the last half year, I've seen many cell ag companies switching from B2B, from B2C to B2B, and to producing ingredients. But that's only one way of talking and seeing change within ingredients. Other areas we're touching, we will get to know by our experts today. So please welcome here today with me, Carlet Lucas, Head of Industry at the Good Food Institute Europe, Panos Kostopoulos, Founder and CEO of Proxy Foods, and Rebecca Bohlmann, Product Manager at Plantaneers. Now, Panos, I know reformulation is actually also at the heart of what you are working on with artificial intelligence. Can you tell us a bit more about your work and where you're heading at?
Greetings, everyone. Nadine, Vera, thank you so much for the invitation. I feel pretty honored to be here and participating in this discussion. So what we do with Proxy, we offer a dedicated software platform to R&D teams and food product developers so they can accelerate new product development and reformulation. When we founded this organization, the goal was simple: to help companies create recipes where every recipe contributes to the well-being of planet, the people, and all future generations. But there is a lot of challenges when you want to innovate. Innovate means change. Change too many times means loss, and you have to adapt to this change. So we're thinking, how can we catalyze creativity? How can we help food product developers maybe skip some of the tedious tasks of reformulating and what it means when you replace an ingredient with each other? And how can we help them focus on what really matters? Creating and delivering exceptional experiences for the clients without having too many limitations. So we offer a suite of tools that the food product developers can have various predictive analytics from nutrition, from flavor, from texture, organoleptic, to see the regulatory compliance from day zero, so you don't have to do the formula, go back. And how do you start with your goals from the beginning, and how through an iterative process and a feedback mechanism you tend to optimize. So we combined data science and software engineering to help the change makers of this world to help nourish the planet in a better way. Thank you.
You've already touched on so many areas, and I would love to know what actually is the most important reformulation goal, but let's talk about that later, because nutrition, I think, is so, reformulating to healthy products is really important, and how many companies are heading there. Rebecca, maybe you maybe can also say something about that. I know you released a paper together with some colleagues on ultra-processed food. Can you tell us more about that and about your work, and maybe even what role nutrition plays?
So health is definitely always a topic that is discussed out in the open. Thanks for the possibility to talk about this today. At Plantaneers, we do functional ingredient blends for plant-based alternatives, and we noticed that the discussion around ultra-processed foods was gaining a lot of momentum, especially in the context, of course, of plant-based alternatives. And there was just a big general public interest. Also, 2 years ago, there was a book released called Ultra Processed Peoples, with many consumers asking, what am I actually putting into my body, and growing concern. And then we saw just that it made sense for us to compile scientific information and practical insights into one paper. This is why we created this white paper that is out in the open and available for everyone. And our goal was then to kind of create a foundation for a dialogue and capturing the current state of knowledge on this topic, and also stating what is needed in the future to have a better assessment there. And maybe also later we get into that, of course, also possible solutions. And there we see us kind of as a strategical functional ingredient provider that has these topics, of course, in mind.
Knowledge is a good point. I know, Carlet, you are also always releasing papers at GFI, great overviews on the current state of knowledge in different areas. And when I, as I already said, came across ingredients as a goal for cellular agriculture companies, I thought it was very interesting that you also, at the moment, you published a paper, or 2 papers even, on precision fermentation and ingredients. Can you tell us more about this paper and also about your role at GFI?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So our theory of change at the Good Food Institute in terms of making alternative proteins available, accessible, and a success basically for the industry and consumers more broadly is primarily that they need to taste as good as or better than conventional products and cost the same or less. And we all know that most alternative protein and plant-based products today still struggle to reach taste parity. It's just a lot harder, I think, maybe than we realize as an industry from the start to make something taste that way. And I think that's why there's a lot of excitement and interest in ingredients that if we kind of can push the bar there and get better inputs, that we can improve the taste and texture. And precision fermentation especially, I think, is a really promising area. We're seeing companies creating ingredients such as casein, whey, kind of common dairy proteins, egg proteins that are biologically identical to their animal conventional counterpart, which really helps to address a lot of those taste and functionality challenges we've had with plant-based ingredients to date. And I think it also actually relates to the kind of broader nutrition clean label trend, because if we're able to integrate these types of precision fermentation ingredients that taste better and perform better, we will also need to add less additives, flavorings, texturants, etc. down the road. So it's an exciting space. We're seeing a lot of interest both from startups, investors, corporates. And what we wanted to do as GFI is help the sector understand, where are the opportunities right now, recognizing that, the other part of alternative protein success, it's not just taste, but it's also price. And how do we create these ingredients at a price point that we can actually integrate them and they're going to be feasible for consumers to buy. So the report we released is really understanding which ingredients are commercially viable at the moment to address via precision fermentation, and understand how that helps us basically scale up this whole sector.
Price, taste, and texture definitely, in the midst of creating protein for the future. I'd say somehow when we're talking about precision fermentation and we're talking about UPFs, there is a clash because we perceive precision fermentation as something which is very highly processed. But before we talk about that, Rebecca, would you tell us a bit more about the history of UPFs? Because I think many people don't even know where it comes from. We're all in this area. We're facing the problem of the discourse out there, of the dialogue, talking to people because they're afraid of the products, but it's actually way older than just the last 5 years. Is that right?
Exactly. As I just said, there was a book published 2 years ago, but the concept actually dates back to Brazil in 2009, where Carlos Monteiro, he was at the University Sao Paulo for nutrition, and his team developed the NOVA classification in 2009. And then it was also introduced into the Brazilian dietary guidelines in 2014. It was then later popularized through different publications and used in many nutritional studies as a way to compare, for example, it also with the Nutri-Score. And the core idea of this whole system is that industrial processing reduces the value of food. And in practice, it actually doesn't even measure the processing rather than what appears on the ingredient list, which is understandable since labeling is what consumers can directly evaluate actually in a supermarket, because you don't see the processes or the enzymes that are used. But of course, this also creates a lot of different limitations. And for precision fermentation and also mycoprotein, but also different plant proteins that have to be concentrated, novel ingredients often fall outside the system, which is understandable because the system was created in 2009. There were probably some smart people working on precision fermentation, but we were definitely not at the point that we are right now. And this kind of leads to a structural bias. And which is also really interesting. Of course, it's hard for consumers to actually put the different food groups or the products into the different categories, but also for experts. There was a study done in France. They had a lot of issues categorizing the products right. And we also had plant engineers. I did some internal testing, and most of the time it didn't go very well, and everyone here is really into food science. So it is a little bit difficult, but in essence, the concepts kind of shifts away from nutrient profiles, what is the generally accepted measurement for evaluating health of different foods, towards the food matrix and the ingredients that are supposedly bad for you. So this is definitely challenging some long-established views in food chemistry in general, but this also means that many technological advances are not properly reflected in this system when we talk about food quality.
Panos, could you maybe help with your AI there? And also, I know you are looking at a research project in Brazil, which I thought was very interesting, for ingredients for cellular agriculture. Is that right? Because you're deeply involved with cellular agriculture as well.
Correct. So something I wanted to add, it's critical to consider consumer perception. And I think this changes everything, because what we are going to define as ultra-processed foods, not all processes are equal. And as an example, back 300 years ago and 400 years ago, and in France, for example, the refined white flour was the good flour. When you had the whole wheat flour, was the lower cost. Because it was less processed. Back in the day, you add more process, you had more of like a pure ingredient that had maybe better functional properties in cooking, and this had higher price. Now, what we realized after some time is that some processes affect the nutritional retention. You have different molecules that are maybe more sensitive in a high pressure, high temperature, and guidelines on that, but you also have the formation of some components, like when you warm up tomato and you have specific lycopene. So how do we help? The part of the nutritional value is we help companies identify these changes on a molecular level per processing step. If you do this increase this thermal processing, what kind of effect will have on your macro and micro composition? What potential molecules will be created that may be beneficiary or may be harmful? What of these beneficiary molecules that you had, maybe now you have 70% retention if you do that, and maybe if you combine it with another processing step or you follow it later in your process, maybe you could save some of these valuable compounds. So we help companies identify what will be the effect per processing step, and we do the nutritional, organoleptic, functional, shelf life predictions per each process. Now, regarding the project that we have with the University of Federal of Paraná, Brazil, is a collaboration with also McGill University. And what we want to do is to find intelligent pathways to new ingredients for cell growth media and cellular agriculture. So we want to find plant-based ingredients that could be used as medium for mammalian cell cultivated application. So this means, how do you first create, similarly to what Carla mentioned, how do you create a curated ingredient database, maybe with some repository of plant-derived side streams, like from fruit residues, legumes, oilseed extracts that maybe in a combination could capture the compositional, functional, and supply chain attributes that could make it a potential candidate or a mixture of candidates for this formulation. Then how do you find the markers needed to do the optimization? So what will be, how do you close the feedback loop through, from cell growth, from adhesion, for any metrics that you need in order to see if this worked or how didn't work? And this could help with two things. It could help, number one, with the cost, but also could help us understand per species that maybe there are more solutions that we are not aware of. And big part of cellular agriculture was based on our knowledge from tissue engineering and how would we grow fibroblasts, for example, for human applications. But we see that there is a lot of variations per species for what you want to grow, for what the stage. So I think there is a whole world of opportunities that we could capture and see how we could optimize them.
Yeah, I guess there are so many ingredients and so many outcomes we don't know about. I mean, Carla, that's actually what you also were looking at for precision fermentation, right? You analyzed 67 ingredients, if I got it right, and identified 16 good ones to bridge, as you say, the valley of death. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, maybe I'm going to share a slide right now just to talk through that a little bit. But yeah, going back to that point that we need to find ingredients that can be commercially viable. And we've seen the initial precision fermentation startups that have come on the market have focused on primarily dairy proteins. And that's fantastic from an impact perspective. But we saw that actually from a reaching price parity perspective, that's really, really hard because the cost of conventional dairy proteins is so low. So we wanted to do an analysis to understand, okay, what ingredients, proteins, fats, small molecules are out there that are potentially viable right now in the short term that can serve as a stepping stone to maybe some of those longer term commodity molecules. And it was really important for us in our analysis, not just to come up with a list of molecules, but also to really develop a framework that companies like yourselves can actually use if you want to be doing this type of thinking in-house. So maybe I'll just talk through the steps a little bit of the framework, which could be relevant. So we started off with developing a long list of ingredients we were potentially interested in, about 70 of them relevant to the food sector. Then we did some desk research to understand what is the market size of each of these ingredients and what is the current kind of price point that they're being sold at. Now, because we worked with a consultancy, Arthur D. Little, on this, we didn't have the capacity to dive into the cost of production for each of those 70 molecules individually, we started to bundle them into what we called archetypes. So which of the molecules had similar kind of features, similar complexity, similar downstream processing configurations, so we could bundle them and kind of do the analysis in a more efficient way. So we ended up with a handful of different archetypes that we then basically did a techno-economic assessment on, or we developed a cost of production model, which told us, okay, if we wanted to develop this ingredient or molecule with precision fermentation, what would be the cost of that? And then we compared that to what is the market price today. And that is basically how we came down to our list of 16. So just to actually kind of quickly show it. So all of this is in a report on our website, which you can find as well. Long list of almost 70 molecules. The ones that are highlighted are the ones that we found had the most potential. I think what's noticeable on the list is it's mostly proteins, actually, instead of fats or lipids or small molecules that came to the top. I think that makes sense because in general, proteins have a higher price point compared to those other groups. And I think some of them, some of these are probably you might recognize, and we're starting to actually see some traction already in the alternative protein space around this. So one of them, for example, is lactoferrin. It's also a dairy protein. And we're actually starting to, over the past few years, seeing more precision fermentation companies focus on this, because lactoferrin is actually an ingredient that is sold at a very high price point today, because you can find it in such small quantities in milk. So we're starting to see some companies kind of go this way. And I think two other ingredients or molecules that were interesting from this list are hemoglobin and myoglobin, so more the heme proteins. That's also something we've seen alternative protein companies start to focus on. Heme was kind of made kind of famous a little bit by Impossible Foods in the beginning, who used heme protein to really add that juicy, bloody, kind of red taste and texture to their ingredients. And so I think as an industry, there's a lot of potential there as well. The report gets into a lot more analysis, but I think what we are really trying to do is support companies in this space who are interested in exploring precision fermentation to better understand, okay, where can we focus, where are the opportunities, and especially, where are they commercially viable?
Thank you, Carlet. Panis, when you take a look at that, is this like, do you say, oh yeah, I've heard about that and that and that, and this is actually also when we do our AI analysis, these are the ingredients for a good reformulation? Can you give us some hints on is there any ingredient in your analysis where you say this is the one ingredient which really is good for texture or taste or price? Is price actually also something you are focusing on then, or is it more texture, taste?
Of course, the cost is a factor, and the ingredient, and the processing, and the labor side, and on the other components that can be expanded to cost. But exactly, you have all of these ingredients, and then you say you have the action, the active ingredients that you want to use, and then you have to find the source. So you have you see, as we have the example of hemoglobin that you have from potentially from legumes that you can use, like Pichia pastoris or another yeast or another host organism to produce. So there are two ways. There is one, do you want to use? And I think there are finding the ingredient, the source in any form that you can functionally test it at your formulation. And then you say, okay, how can I source this ingredient? So there are two paths. And I think in the whole fermentation, we have a big unknown because we haven't fully understand the whole metabolic pathways and the metabolites, and this gets exponentially more complex if you add both the chromosomal and the plasmid DNAs, and you have the recombinant proteins and the precision fermentation. Then how do you filter them? And then how are you sure that you filter the ingredient that you want to test into your formula? So it can get very complicated. So that's why what GFI is doing and why research and open research is needed. But I think it would be critical to see a little bit more understanding on the metabolic pathway side, and then on the filtration separation side down the level. Now, this is more about if you have a different host. If you want to try a pure, let's say, ingredient that you can even take from a pharmaceutical application and try it in your formula, then at least you can know, okay, this is a molecule or this is a compound that gives me the functionalities that I desire for my formula. Then the next second part is, okay, how can I grow this ingredient or source this ingredient, or are there ingredients or molecules that are similar to those that can I use? So these are some of the thoughts that the companies and the decisions they need to make. By the way, I forgot to mention that the program earlier was also a grant from GFI Brazil, and I just wanted to mention that, not to feel like that I didn't say their name.
No, oh God, yeah. The alternative industry area is small, and I guess it totally makes sense that GFI is involved there. And also interesting, maybe for you, Carlette, because I could imagine you can combine your research and also the AI with the precision fermentation. Now, this is all highly technological and very hard to understand for consumers. In the video we saw from ADM was stated that it's actually consumer demand that we reformulate and that we have healthier products. I think many people don't even buy alternative protein by now, so I can't imagine that this is really a consumer demand. Rebecca, what's your take on that? What do we see in consumer demand? And maybe also we can already kind of dive into a counter narrative to UPFs?
So there are definitely some consumers that are very interested in clean label recipes and formulations, and often it can help to get people to try new things where they maybe have some fear. But most people, so we have about 60% in the middle that are neither very interested in the products, then there are the 20% that are very interested in certain aspects, also sustainability, but the 60% are basically just hanging by, trying their best in their everyday life. And I think it's much more important that the products are affordable and the taste and the texture is a great match, and also the availability of the different products, of course. So there are consumer groups, and I think it can be a great USP for your product to differentiate yourself, but so can also nutritional benefits of the different products. I think it just depends, but of course there's also a push from different sides that are looking to reduce additives because they don't want to get negative feedback on their products. And it's something, it's another counter argument for plant-based alternatives for them. So it definitely makes sense to work on these improvements, but there will be still a great mass market for products that have additives, which are also proven not to be harmful. Regarding a future perspective, again, it is all about perspective. Processes like classic fermentation are a great example for this. They are highly technological and super complex. Making your own sourdough and kimchi, it takes a little bit of work, but to understand this process exactly is really difficult. But still, it is something that is perceived very positively, and we also see many claims for this on different packages. And it is all about framing. So also, which is important in regions where food safety and quality are taken for granted, there's often less appreciation, of course, for the role of the technology achieving this. So education and transparency are key for this, and also showing how technology makes food safer, more stable, and more sustainable. So this kind of just depends. And what Pano said earlier, also maybe showing which processes reduce certain harmful molecules, or with precision fermentation, there's, for example, with Impossible, the benefit that it actually has this authentic bloody taste. And this is just, again, it's all about communication, as it is usually with life. When we talk about the health aspects in the UPF context, this classification has, of course, been strongly criticized by different scientists, stating that it's mainly politically motivated and carries a lot of ideology with it. There was an open letter by the Technische University, so Technical University of Dresden. And I think it showcases really well what exactly is still not very clear about all these aspects. And when we look at actual studies, so there are definitely many that show that a higher UPF consumption in general, with all kinds of UPFs, so from sugary soda to fried crisp to a plant-based chicken breast, correlate with negative health outcomes. So there's an increased risk, for example, for cardiometabolic health, multimorbidity, and also mortality. But a key question there remains, is it actually the nutrient profile of these products, so their tendency to be high in fat, saturated fat, sugar, and salt that drives this association, or is it about the processing and the additives? Because it can be quite different. So you're kind of comparing apples with pears, that you have a chicken alternative or a pea drink, and you compare to a potato crisp that is fried or a soda with sugar. If you look into the actual categories, unfortunately, there are not that many studies on this yet, so I'm waiting for some new ones. But there is one where they use the EPIC cohort, and there is a little bit more finely split up in different categories. And there we actually see that the category of plant-based alternatives do not appear to have the same negative association as other typical ultra-processed foods. And again, in this category is a product like a plant-based yogurt that has a good protein profile and offers maybe even some calcium. But in there is also a cheesy nugget that is fried, maybe even double fried. And I think it would really help there to split up the categories to understand exactly how we can improve UPFs, because they are not going anywhere, especially in those days where not everyone has that much time to prepare their different foods, and people are trying to reduce their meat intake. So it kind of depends a little bit, and it is not that you can put all UPFs into a single bucket and assume the same for every product. For example, also just adding B12 or calcium would make a product automatically an UPF.
I think there is very much confusion about what a UPF actually is. So it's very helpful that you have this paper, and also about what technology brings, and as you said, like different ingredients, fat, and what is actually bad, what is good. It's very difficult to go to the education part. Panos, I know you're working with several different companies. Where do you see, can you give us a take on what companies actually in which area are changing? Because what's also confusing kind of is that we are talking about alternative protein as UPF and as unhealthy and reformulating them, but also alternative protein is the source of new ingredients and making changing the system. So it's again very complex. How do you get this together, and where do you see the change? Where are the companies coming in to reformulate, and where do you reformulate?
Yes, and I want to highlight what Rebecca mentioned about the framing. We have the example of Poppy, the soda drink in the US, where they added these prebiotics through the fermentation, and the consumers now think that this is tasty and healthy, even though we know that there is no too little evidence about the prebiotics benefits, but everybody now thinks that this is healthy, and it had like a great exit and was acquired, and all of these things. How many people understand the difference between the prebiotic fermentation and maybe like a precision fermentation and ingredient to understand what's the actual health outcome? And the things that we don't know are so far more than the things that we know. And one reason for that is like to do even like trials for the food. You have multi inputs and multi outputs. You have from the metabolomics, from the specific biomarkers, from the blood tests. You have so many things, and it's so difficult to isolate what will be the effect, both the negative effects and the positive effects, and from the bioavailability to other maybe harmful cases. So the transparency, I think it's critical to know what we don't know, and I'm sure many companies will utilize the ignorance of the consumers to maybe push something that will be a benefit. There are other companies that maybe will communicate, but we don't know actually also as an industry what to clearly communicate. There are some things that we know, there are some things that we don't know, but the things we don't know are much larger now. Regarding the market from the companies, we see that the companies, they have two drivers of change. Number one is the market demand and what consumers want. Number two is like the regulatory compliance that derives from what they should do. So how do you increase the health outcome of the planet or of a country? The goal is for the regulations, the all the political landscape to increase the demand of health outcomes and decrease the supply of non-healthy foods. How do you decrease the demand? Is by education, as you said. But if you don't know very well the education, this can get challenging. So I think there should be a lot of effort on how do we help consumers understand and decrease their demand for unhealthy options. Now, the other side is how do you do compliance on the composition, on what you can use, what are the max limits, the mix limits from the regulatory framework perspective to decrease the supply, because maybe some consumers will get confused and they will end up just buying what's the cheaper or what has the best color on the packaging that we see. This is an actual consumer behavior. So I think you have two angles, both from the legislative side, both from the market side, and the companies in the middle, and they're trying to understand how to navigate. And this gets more and more complex. Consumers demand more, but they don't always know why they're demanding something. You have more of fragmented requests. So we see a more of dynamic and interesting landscape, and from many companies from different angles.
You're working together with companies. Is this actually something you also see? And how do companies have to go more to the role of educating people?
Companies sometimes through the claims and the packaging, and it's what we see that the companies, they change. Of course, we see now in the US, how do you replace these dyes? How do you replace some specific artificial components? So this derives again from both sides. The companies that we work with, they want to replace the ingredients that they're not allowed to use in some time, but also the ingredients consumers don't want to see on the label. And now we know that the FDA will come with a new nutritional guidelines that will be implemented soon. So for the companies, you create new products, and the companies we work with, there are both ingredient companies, CPG brands, food service operators, meal providers. They all have a different needs, but all of these needs derive from, okay, how do we remove the ingredients that they added this functionality? And this is more complex than it sounds, because we see the example of sucrose. When you remove sucrose from something, this also has a hamactan, that's the sweetener. This also changes how the texture will change. This will also change your ingredient providers. This will also change your supply chain. This will change the shelf life. So when you change something, you have to see of all the potential outcomes and what that means. But yes, we work with companies on both the reformulation, but also sometimes on the new product development. And as we see with the current macroeconomics, more companies will focusing on reformulation and new product development, but to be within the limits. As you know, the inflation, the geopolitical status, the macroeconomics, and the white label rise of what's happening in the grocery stores leads the companies to play a little bit more defense, at least for more from the retail packaged CPG side. The food service, they changed a little bit the game, and this is very interesting. I want to highlight how we're also going to see changes on the food service. Why? Because now it's a black box, and we see people have less and less time to prepare food at home, but they want to have more transparency on their options. So I think both on the CPG and the food service side, we're going to see changes, and these companies are preparing to be ready for what's going to happen within the next few years.
Carl, please also share your take on that. But looking at the time we have left, I also want to switch to maybe what are the most important questions, and also like low-hanging fruits, quick wins we can have for the industry going there. Because I think education, for example, yes, it's like a change maker, but it's such a huge task.
That's a lot of questions and a lot of opportunities to take this. I think maybe where I would focus is there's obviously a lot of great innovation out there and a lot of ideas around improving ingredients to address all the challenges we've talked about. but it's going to take a whole ecosystem. And just as the way Panos was speaking, there are driving forces on all sides that are either going to make or break this. And so if we take the example of precision fermentation ingredients, if we want companies to be able to scale up and to succeed, it's not just going to take these ingredient companies, but it's also going to take the CPG companies who are going to buy them to demonstrate demand, the end retailer who's going to start preparing the consumer. So collaboration is key here, and aligning on kind of where are the challenges right now, who needs to come in, what conversations do we need to be having, I think is essential. I think this conversation is a good example of that. But yeah, we need to figure out how to scale up these innovations now, and that's going to take all hands on deck.
Definitely. Rebecca, where are you heading at when it comes to quick wins? I mean, do you have any projects right now you can talk about where you are maybe changing not what consumers think, but maybe companies? I don't know. Give us some insights.
Yeah, definitely. So clean label recipes are definitely something we are approaching while maintaining the taste and the texture of the products that people love and know. And also, of course, fermented proteins are highly interesting, just improving what they actually can do in a product and removing additives that are not so desirable by people. But of course, also we see that making the products more accessible is rather important, because there has been an update of the planetary health diet, and it doesn't look too good for us. So we are far from the targets, and we need to find a way to feed a growing global population sustainably. But also, of course, AI helps us to better predict sensory experiences and understand this highly subjective field of science. It is still, as I said, highly subjective, which can kind of slow down the improvements, and we see shorter product life cycles. So it's important to adapt rather fast to the different products and find a quick way to get into the markets, of course.
AI definitely is a solution and a way to change the formulations of the products. Panos, what's your the question you want to answer maybe in the next year, or what is the question we all should answer in the next year? And maybe you can also give us a last insight on, when it goes to AI, we are very open when it comes to our work and texting, but maybe people would even also have a problem with artificial intelligence in food, because it's all, again, a technology and it's food. Yeah.
Yes. Number one, we see that the three things, the main points are maximize protein, decrease sodium, decrease sucrose, and remove ingredients that they don't look well, or maybe add them as natural flavorings or other categories. We see this quite strongly, like from the demands. And now, the question that we all need to ask ourselves is like, what we really don't know. I think this is very, very important to see as an ecosystem what we don't know, and see what are the things that we need to know and will have a cascading effect, and who can answer these things. And because this is very complex, not in one company has enough budget to answer these questions. So then we need to think a good strategy on how do we answer the things we don't know. And when we have more clarity, I think this will have a better strategy. Now, regarding the artificial intelligence in food, most people want technology all over their life except their food. This is something, and this derives from the way that we have evolved as a species. Familiarity and exposure to something that seems natural was designed to us to not be scared of it. And this is also why the repetitive exposure of one flavor will may change our perception. We may start liking something. You eat something for the first time, you say, what's that? And then you eat it for the 10th time, and you really, really like it. So there is the part of tech scary, and artificial intelligence with many other scenarios, realistic or non-realistic, can not help that. But again, this would be part of the communication, and I think the consumers, they don't care, they don't have much time to really understand how technology shapes their products. Like they want to see, and now the two KPIs, they say, can I afford it? Does it have the protein that I want? Does it taste good? Do I have an overall healthy perception about this product? And then I think this will be sufficient. Now, if we consider that AI will bring a change, and change will not bring definitely a loss, as we see, and we don't want changes in our food inputs because of the biological safety, security, rationality that I explained earlier, I think we can justify it. And the consumers, they start interacting more and more with Gen AI specifically. They were interacting without knowing that their Google Maps had machine learning traditional many years ago, and they don't mind using Google Maps with AI to have an accurate prediction. So as long as the companies use the technologies available, including AI, including precision fermentation, including collaboration, that they will create the products consumer wants, I don't think there will be an issue. Like with Poppy, as example, nobody knows if Gen AI or any traditional ML was created. As far as the perception and the framing, as both Rebecca and Carla mentioned earlier, this is going to be critical.
Thank you so much for your take on AI. I think I could have a session with each of you guys for 45 minutes, and we could deep dive into every topic. We will definitely, keep asking the questions that need to be asked. Thank you for watching. Thank you for all your insights, and I hope we're going to see us next month in November 20th, and we're going to take another deep dive on ingredients, but from a different angle.